Oopsie. Is your sketchbook practice in a bit of a rut? I'm going to share and review a few new supplies that I got to refresh mine. Hi there, I'm Janine. I'm an artist and I share my creative journey on this channel. I've been struggling to keep up a consistent sketchbook practice, even though it's very valuable to have one. So one thing that does motivate me to get going is some new supplies. So I have a box of supplies here that I want to share with you. So this is from Jackson's. I do get most of my supplies from Jackson's. They're in the UK, but I do believe they ship internationally. So these are basically all things to use in my sketchbook, but obviously also on other paintings apart from the sketchbook. So the first thing, let me get them all out. The first thing is this Jackson's own brand watercolor sketchbook. It's 160 grams. I haven't tried these before. I've seen them for a while on their website, but I do use not as much watercolor anymore as I used to, but sometimes I do. So let's have a look at it. So it's got it's nicely cloth bound. Looks like this. It's actually, does it say the size on here? Oh yes, 17 by 24 centimeters, which I think is somewhere in between A5 and A4. So I'm going to test that in a bit. It's got like a cold press texture, and it looks almost the same on both sides. Often it's a lot smoother on one side. It's a little bit smoother here, a little bit rougher here. So I'm excited to try that. Then I do use a lot of acrylic paint in my sketchbooks, mainly because I'm just used to working with acrylics. So this is a acrylic fluid matte medium. And what I'm planning to do with this is, once I've finished an acrylic sketch in my sketchbook, I want to add some of this matte medium on top so the pages don't stick together as much. I have some matte medium that's a gel, but I thought it'd be a lot easier to apply a fluid medium. And then in this box, I got quite a few markers, I believe, like acrylic markers. Ooh, it's got peanuts. Let's get rid of the peanuts. So I got 2 Stabilo Woodies and 3 Posca pens. So this isn't actually exactly the first time trying these. I already have a lot of the Stabilo Woodies, but I didn't have those 2 colors. So this one is the, ooh, where am I? 880-334, which is like a light pink. And the other one is 880, 450 is then the color number. They're water soluble, and what I like about them is that they're really got these really big nibs. So on a larger painting, you can actually see them rather than just some thin water soluble pencils. I have used Poscas before. I think probably most artists have used Poscas by now, but I haven't used these really thick ones. These are 8mm nibs. Yeah, they're huge, like this. And the colors I got, this is a light orange, which is interesting. In, I think French is called rose salmon, which I guess is pink salmon. Then this one is beige. I think I've had the off-white, but not the beige before, in a thinner version. And this is slate grey, which I think looks kind of bluish, so I'm hoping that's also what it'll come out as. So let's swatch these in the new book. I also write down what they are so I will remember. So that's the pink one. 334 is the color number. And then this one, quite waxy actually. And let's see what they're like with water. Yeah, so they don't like dissolve loads, but a little bit, which is nice. I don't tend to use this kind of pink a lot. It's more almost magenta. I have another pink that's quite light, almost like a more beigey pink, which I really like. But I thought maybe one day I might need something like this. And this is a nice like cerulean kind of blue. Very pretty. And then I'll start with the light one. I wonder if that's going to go through. We'll see. The water didn't warp the paper very much, just a little bit. Gotta shape them first. And then bump. I think that ripped the paper a little bit. Nice. Not coming through to the other side. And you can make longer strokes, thinner strokes, and then you can use the wider side to make wider strokes. Revolutionary. And that was beige. Let's try this one. Again, shaky. Thin and thick. Very nice. It's not too intense, not as neon-y as the cap might suggest. Light orange. And then this one, got high hopes for that. Ooh, that is a pretty colour. It's definitely wouldn't call it grey. It's like a beautiful midnight navy greyish blue. Love that one. Look how intense. And it goes down really evenly. Actually, we'll see once it's dry. That is slate grey. And I'll let you know what I think of those once I've used them a little bit more in my sketchbook. I'm going to try some acrylics and some watercolour. And I can try the new matte medium on the acrylics. So this is just a travel palette that I've got. It's most of it is the original Daniel Smith watercolours. I believe it's the ultimate mixing set. Oh no, it's not. So this isn't the ultimate mixing set. I've just added a few random watercolours in here. So I just grabbed a few random watercolours. I have a Daniel Smith Prussian Green. I have a Daniel Smith Buff Titanium. And also Daniel Smith Naphthalide Maroon. And a very dirty palette. The water is buckling quite a lot because it's not very thick, so that's why I tried a bit of wet and wet here and added quite a lot of water. But it does take the paint quite nicely, so I think just for a sketchbook it's great, at least from my initial thoughts. I know I don't use watercolour properly, I just play with it. So I'm sorry if you're a proper watercolour artist and you're completely cringing at this right now. I really like the colour that I made here earlier with the buff titanium and the green. But it's not about reviewing these Daniel Smith watercolours. So you can see it is buckling where I've added the watercolour, especially this one. So it is very thin for proper watercolour. So I might not actually use it for watercolour, but I'll probably keep trying just to be able to tell you exactly if I recommend it for watercolor. Enough of that. This is awful. I apologize. I apologize to anybody who came to see a beautiful painting today. I'm going to let this dry and then try the acrylics. I can't be bothered to get my acrylic palette out, so I'm just going to use these pre-mixed colors. My camera did not turn on, which classic error. I'm basically just trying to add a load of acrylic paint onto both pages so I can see if the matte medium stops them from sticking together. If you like this video, consider subscribing. I've been testing everything for about a month or so. I made quite a few sketches in different sketchbooks to test out the materials. I've also used them on some of my panels of my current series. So first I'll show you some of the sketches that I made. So on this sketchbook is 160 grams, which I knew was going to be quite thin paper. But I thought I'd try it anyway. But it does buckle a lot. Once you close the book, obviously the paper gets a little bit smoother. But yeah, even though, yeah, it does buckle quite a bit. Which, it depends on what I'm working on, bothers me or doesn't bother me, but because I use a lot of water, I do find that it bothers me. So I still prefer a thicker paper, probably 200 grams minimum. But I do really like the texture and it feels nice to paint on. So if you're not using too much water, this is definitely a perfectly fine sketchbook. It's bound very well. It doesn't lie super flat. I always have to use these clips. I always use paper clips like these and just, well, you know how a paper clip works. Just clamp them on the side, flip down this lower bit, and then Bob's your uncle. So that doesn't bother me too much that it doesn't lie completely flat. But if that bothers you, then I probably wouldn't go for this one. Now, the Posca pens. So these are the 3 colors I bought. I really like the colors. This one is a little bit more neon than I hoped. It says light orange, but it's quite a neon-y orange. You can, well, I'll show you one of my sketches where I've used it. Like here. I don't know if that looks the same on camera, but probably looks a little bit duller on camera than it actually is. It's still a very nice color, but it's got the neon touch to it. Not as neon as the cap, that is ridiculously neon. But I love, love, love this color and this color. So that's the beige and the slate gray. I'll definitely use these a lot, probably. And what I love about the large nibs, so they're like this. I think these are 8mm, yeah, 8mm chisel tip. This is great for making, for covering larger surfaces really quickly. That's one of the things I enjoyed most, just covering really big areas in one go. Did I do it here? Yeah. I tried that everywhere, really. Yeah, so I already had these 3, which are just white and ivory, but these are thinner. So this one's just a super fine one. And then these 2 are the same nib size. This kind of tip, which is 1.8 to 2.5. I guess if you use the tip like this, it's 1.8. And then if you use the longer side of it, it's 2.5. But that's obviously nothing compared to 8mm. So I really love those big ones, especially if I want to use them on larger paintings. Another thing I wanted to mention about the Poscas is that they layer very well, but they have to be very dry. So for example, here you see that the light one went over the dark neocolor. The light one went over the dark Posca, but sometimes it didn't seem to work that well. Like here it also worked really well. I guess when it's not quite dry, like here, I guess it still works. It's not super opaque, but you can definitely layer them. And they of course also layer very well over acrylics, but the acrylics have to be very dry because otherwise you just clog up your nibs with the acrylic paint and then you can't really use them anymore. Oopsie. I also found that they don't really bleed through, like you can see. Well, first of all, in this sketchbook, obviously, which is the one from the haul, I've done all these really dark colours and, well, there's a little bit. Is that from... Actually, I think that's where I wet it, so ignore that. But they don't bleed through the paper on none of these, actually. Not even this really dark one. Posca pen, definitely worth the hype. I really like them. Nobody seems to know anything about their archival quality, how long they last, how light fast they are, but especially if you just use it in your sketchbook, then it doesn't really matter. So thumbs up from me for the Posca pens. Then the other thing I bought was these two Stabilo Woodies. Already had all of these, and I'm pretty sure I now have all the colours, which is why I bought these two. These aren't really colours that I gravitate towards. Maybe I use this every now and then, but this is usually this pink is usually too bright for my liking. But these were, I think, probably the only colours I didn't have in my collection already. That's why I went for those. And I did actually enjoy branching out of my usual colour palette a bit more. You can see this is very pink. And I enjoyed the pink with the yellow. And obviously, because I've already had so many other colours, I have used them quite a bit before. But I still just tried to experiment a bit more. Here I layered them over the Posca pens. And I really enjoy just wetting them with a brush and turning them more into watercolour. They are quite waxy, so they don't dissolve as much as, for example, a Neocolor 2 crayon. So you always tend to see the, like this is quite a good example. You always still see the texture underneath a lot where you applied the crayon. This I haven't wetted, but this I have. This here is where I still had some of it in my brush. That's why you can't see any of the pencil texture here. But I really love those, especially because they're so, the nibs are so big that they're really good also for using on my larger paintings, because you can easily see them if they're bigger. So I have done quite a bit more in my sketchbook, which is the whole purpose of this haul. Still not as much as I'd like, but life just gets in the way and I just have to do it whenever I can. One thing to note with the Stabilos is that obviously because they are water soluble, they do need fixing with a fixative, unless they're just in your sketchbook. But if you use them for paintings you want to sell, for example, then you should always fix them with a fixative so they don't budge. The one I use is the Spectrafix, which I think is fairly eco-friendly, which is why I bought it, but it's not my favourite because it doesn't actually fix it that well. You might get some other ones that are a little bit better at fixing it in place. Now the other thing I bought was this acrylic fluid matte medium, and the main reason I got this was because I use a lot of acrylics in my sketchbooks. You can see I've used it on this page. And I thought it would help them not stick together, but I think I've done about 3 coats of this on here and it's still sticking together. So it's no good for that actually. I sometimes put glassine paper in between, but I can't really be bothered to do that all the time. So I thought that would be easier, but no. Doesn't work for that. But what I do like it for is on the panels of my series, I often use things like Neocolor. After spraying them with the fixative, I want to make sure that it definitely won't budge. So I dab a little bit of usually gloss medium on top of it so that it really gets fixed in place. But the gloss obviously is very shiny and most of the panel of the other colors isn't shiny. And when I photograph it, then I have a bit of glare wherever I put gloss medium. So I thought I can use the matte medium instead for that. So the matte medium obviously doesn't have a glare. And I've applied it on top of this and you can see, hold it in the light, it's like barely got a shine. It's also more of a satin finish I find than a proper matte. But for this I do quite like it. So I think in future, when I put a layer at the end before I photograph them of medium, I'll use the matte one instead of the gloss. I usually put a gloss medium on as an isolation coat at the end, but I have to do that after I photograph it. So if I have any bits of gloss, then that's quite difficult to photograph. If I use that, I can do the whole thing before I photograph it and it won't have the glare. I wouldn't use it too much in the process because if you use a matte medium, it usually dulls down your colors a little bit. But obviously if you layer that lots and lots, then there will be a difference. But if it's just one coat at the end, I think that's fine. And I usually use a satin varnish anyway. So I think I'll use it for that, but definitely doesn't work to not have the pages stick together. I've linked all the items in the description below if you're interested in trying some of them out yourself. I also recently tried out gouache, which I hadn't really done before. And you might have seen some in the sketchbook like this and some other sketches. If you're interested in seeing that video, then check that out up here. Thanks and bye bye. I've tested everything. Oh, here's a train. Here's a train, very good timing.